everyone, and welcome back to a very special Marvel Legends review. Why is this review so special? Well, first of all, it's a deluxe set with 2 action figures in it. The second reason is that it is another entry in the Spider-Man the Animated Series Retro Line wave, which is always special to me. And then finally, it's special because Hasbro have taken a quantum leap forward with this subline. They've done something brand new here, which is really, really exciting, and I hope is an indication of things to look forward to in the future. So I am, of course, talking about the Spider-Man Animated Series Doc Ock and Aunt May set. And when this set was first announced, just a couple of months ago, I was delighted to finally see some brand new sculpts being created especially for this line. Up until this point, most of the Spider-Man Retro Line figures have just been re-releases of figures that were already existing in the Marvel Legends main line, and then just tweaked with paint apps and some cell shading here and there. This is the first time we're getting specific sculpts just to the animated series, and this is really exciting. Less exciting, I have to be honest, is the fact that they've teamed up Doc Ock, probably one of the top characters on my list to get this treatment, with Aunt May, probably one of the bottom characters on my list, if she would even appear on my list at all. This feels a little bit cheeky to me. I think Hasbro know that Doc Ock is going to be a fan favourite, one that most people are desperate to get their hands on. I would have much rather been released single carded than in this more expensive 2-pack with a character that I'm less keen on. Alternatively, this would have been a really cool opportunity to re-release the animated series Spider-Man with the cell shading that came out last year, but was very difficult to get hold of. Okay, I'm conscious that you've been staring at one image for quite a long time now, so I better get on with looking at this packaging. Anyone who picked up the recently released Spider-Man vs. Carnage Deluxe set will know what to expect here, and this will look very, very familiar. This is clearly an oblong cardboard box. There's no window display, it is plastic free, which isn't a fan favourite by any stretch of the imagination, so much so that they are going to actually reverse that soon, hopefully. Now, in terms of the images, again, I love the background. I love this animated series background that we used to see in the old Toy Biz figures. I think it looks glorious. Those pinks and purples look absolutely fantastic. We actually have 2 images here. I believe the Doc Ock is actually literally taken from the images that we saw at the time from the animated series. I think this is what was on his original card art, so this looks really attractive. I don't think Aunt May ever had an initial release in the Toy Biz line all those years ago. This image that they've used here, I think, is just done in the style of the animated series and isn't actually taken from that. I might be wrong, but it's a very good approximation if it isn't. And yeah, I think this looks okay. It looks a little bit strange the way they've kind of copied and pasted these images together. It looks a little bit forced, I have to say. It doesn't quite convince. But that being said, this is very bright, very colourful, and very, very nostalgic. It definitely tips the hat back to the Toy Biz line and of course the animated series itself, so this still looks great on display. When we flip it and we look at the side panel, on one side we have the Spider-Man logo and the billboards of each of these characters replicated from the front. If we flip it and we look at the other side, we can see that they've tried to replicate that VHS sort of effect that we've seen in the popular X-Men animated series line. And then finally on the reverse, we have this really nice image of both of these figures again in that sort of billboard style, very much replicating what we used to see in the Toy Biz back packaging. This looks really, really good. The top half is absolutely really visual and very fun. The bottom half is given over to all this small print, which is less attractive and does ruin the display ability of it, I suppose. But it opens up via a lid at the top of the packaging, and inside you can slide out these 2 cardboard frames that contain the figures within rice paper. I'm sure it'll come as no surprise to anyone watching this, but I'm not a huge fan of this approach. I don't like the fact that there's no real mould to hold these figures securely in the packaging and prevent them from getting damaged, and to be honest, it's a huge faff to get them back into the packaging once you've had them out on display. Okay, I'm going to start off with Aunt May and get her out of the way, since this is the one I'm guessing most people aren't particularly interested in, and there's very good reasons for that. Obviously not the most exciting character in the world, but how does the figure measure up? Well, not fantastically, to be honest. It does feature a brand new head sculpt, which is always appreciated, and it is animated series specific, which is a nice touch. That being said, I'm not sure if it's that good a sculpt. Now, of course, the animated series should be a little bit softer. It's definitely got a look of that version of the character, but this doesn't look quite right. There's almost too much detail here, and she looks just a little bit too, I don't know, strange. It seems to be a perennial curse of Aunt May figures where they never look quite right and they always look slightly odd. As for the body mold, I feel like I've seen this before. This feels like a reassembly of different pieces I've seen on various different figures. I can't quite place all of them, but I've definitely seen these before, I'm sure of it, but please do correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. What is nice about this though, is that they have at least got the colours pretty much spot on to what we see in the animated series. Aunt May definitely suffers in the articulation department. She does have a ball joint in the head, so she can move her head from side to side, lean it left and right, and nod it up and down. So far, so good. But from here on out, it's a little bit more disappointing. She does have ball joints in the shoulders. Unfortunately, they are very, very visible. It's not a very attractive joint, but she can get them up a really good distance. Then she's got that unfortunate pin swivel at the elbow, so she can rotate that lower arm around, and she can hinge it to about 90 degrees. Not a huge fan of this joint. It always feels a little bit tenuous to me, like it might just snap off. It just doesn't look great, and of course you can't get the full articulation that you can with some of the other male figures. Then she does have a pin swivel at the wrist, of course, so again the hand can rotate all the way around, it'll hinge forwards and backwards. There is a swivel at the waist that allows the figure to move from side to side, but there doesn't seem to be any ab crunch or any ball joints here that will give her any motion from side to side or to bend forwards and backwards. Likewise, the legs are very, very compromised here. There's no real articulation at the top of the hips. You certainly can't get anything out of it because of this very confining rubber piece skirt, which stops the legs from moving out to the side, moving forwards, or even hinging to 90 degrees at the lower leg there. All you can get out of this is the hinge at the ankle up or down. And as you'd expect, she's also very light when it comes to accessories. All she comes with is an extra pair of closed fists. And to be honest, even that feels out of character and looks slightly odd when you put in action like this. For me, this is a 2-star effort. There's really very limited articulation. The head sculpt is a little bit off for my liking, and all in all, it's not a character I was tremendously excited about in the first place. It's nice to have to build out, flesh out Spider-Man's world, but not strictly necessary, and it's just not that impressive. Okay, so moving on to the one that I was really excited about, and this is of course the brand new sculpt of Doc Ock. This has lots of brand new pieces. In fact, pretty much everything is brand new here, which is really, really exciting, and I really love the colour scheme they've used on him. Let's start off by looking at this head sculpt. I think they've done a pretty good job of this all in all. They've definitely captured the likeness that is specific to the animated series. We can see a little bit of cell shading on the shades there, which I think is really effective, and it's the only time that cell shading appears on this figure, which may or may not be a plus or minus for some of you out there. But I think this looks really, really good. I think this works really well, and I think they've done a nice job of capturing this specific version of Doc Ock. I particularly like how they've managed to get his sort of hairdo right. I'm not quite sure what you call that, really, a bowl cut I suppose. But it looks pretty cool. There's actually not a lot in the way of washes running through it. In fact, there isn't one at all, which is a shame. I like black wash, would have just really enhanced this, but other than that, I think the paint apps on the face are really nicely done, and the new body mold is really, really interesting. As I said, this feels like it's all brand new pieces, unique to this character, which is fantastic, but the materials they've used is unusual as well. This feels mostly like it's made of a rubberized plastic, as opposed to the standard harder, shinier plastic that we're used to. So this is both good and bad. I like the texture of it. I think that works really, really well. It makes it feel a bit more, well, textured and a bit more realistic, which is quite nice. But on the other hand, I do have some issues when it comes to using the articulation, because I don't like this sort of rubberized effect where it feels like things might tear off. They don't kind of ratchet or lock into place per se, and that always makes me feel very, very uncomfortable. But in terms of the colours, I think they look really, really nice. They are just sculpted, moulded in that base plastic, but they're very vivid, they're bright. There's no real washes running through this at all, but as I said, it works quite well in this context, being for the animated series, and I think it will please some people that there is no cell shading here. For me, I don't mind. I'm really happy to have this. I think I probably would have preferred the cell shading so it was more consistent with the other figures in the line, but this works perfectly well. At least it's bright and colourful, and it's definitely distinctive. And finally, Hasbro have taken another stab at Doc Ock's tentacles, and this time I think they've got it right. This has definitely been a struggle for Hasbro in recent years. I feel like Toy Biz had a much better grasp on it, but I feel like Hasbro have finally nailed it. Now, all 4 of these plug in. They're separate pieces to begin with. You have to kind of wedge them in. This takes a little bit of perseverance, to be honest. It wasn't as easy as I thought it might be, but if you're fairly firm with them, they will lock into place and be pretty secure after that. There are 2 different sculpts for the ends of Doc Ock's arms, one open claw and one closed claw. Now, interestingly, it feels like you might be able to swap and change these. They're actually loose and almost articulated. It does feel like this is almost like a ball joint, and I did try to persevere with the idea of maybe swapping them out, but I got so far and I felt I wasn't sure whether I was actually going to snap something off here, so I decided to just leave it be. Now, one of the promises of these new arms was that you'd actually be able to use these to stand Doc up freely on just his tentacles, which is really exciting. Now, I did try to experiment with this, but the arms just feel too long, and I really struggled. You certainly can't do it with just two, or this happens. So, I think you're going to have to use three, or possibly all four, to just balance him correctly. But where these arms do excel is the fact that they are super bendy. They have that wire inside and they look absolutely fantastic. And you can get these into all sorts of different poses and you can curl them up quite tight if you're willing to persevere with them, which I think is a really nice touch and obviously makes for some fantastic display options. So the overall look and visual appearance of this figure is pretty fantastic. It's almost everything I could have possibly wanted, and I think it looks really impressive in the collection. So let's have a look how he fares when it comes to articulation. He's got a ball joint in the top of the neck there, so he can rotate his head all the way around, lean it left and right, and nod it up and down. There's actually a ball joint at the bottom of the neck as well, which there isn't a lot of movement there, but you can get something out of it. Then, of course, he has ball joints in the shoulders, so those arms will lift up, but this is where the rubberized effect starts to worry me. As you can see there, the top of that bicep is coming away a little bit if I do this, so I'm really reluctant to force this, and it doesn't seem to be an awful lot of give here, or much range of motion, which is really disappointing. Now, there is the bicep swivel, as you can see, and a double joint at the elbow, but I was only really able to get the use of one of these joints. I couldn't get it to fold all the way back. There is a pin swivel at the wrist, so that rotates all the way around, hinges forwards and backwards, as you'd expect. Now, there is a ball joint at the waist, which is really effective. He can move from side to side, lean left and right, and even bend forwards and backwards. This works really, really well. It's actually hidden by his belt as well, so this is really attractive, and I think they've done a really nice job with this. Now, he has ball joints in the hips again, so of course his legs will kick out to the side, and there's a complementary upper thigh swivel there as well, which is really nice to see. So the legs will kick forwards, they'll kick backwards, and there's another double joint at the knee there, and this will kick the lower leg all the way back, which is pretty effective for the most part. And then finally there is an ankle rocker pivot ball joint at the bottom of the ankle there, so it will move from side to side and it will hinge forwards and backwards as well. Now, I didn't expect too much in the way of accessories from Aunt May, but for Doc Ock I was hoping for a little bit more. Sadly, all we get is another pair of closed fists, and that's it. There's nothing else, and I feel like for a set that's quite expensive like this, I appreciate a lot of the tooling and effort that's gone into the Doc Ock, but I would have liked some extra pieces here. Surely they could have given us, I don't know, an Octobot or a briefcase full of money or just something like that, maybe something more generic. That would have made this a bit more fun. So I think this is a real lost opportunity and quite disappointing. And finally, a quick scale comparison. Here is Doc Ock next to Aunt May, so you can see just how broad Doc Ock becomes with all of these tentacles when placed next to another figure. And in terms of the scaling here, this looks pretty accurate. This looks quite right, so I'm quite pleased with this. And then once we throw Spider-Man into the mix, you get a better sense of how these figures all scale up. And I think, yeah, they look pretty good, pretty consistent with what we'd expect to see based on what we see on screen. So this is really fun and nicely done. So for me, all things being considered, this is a 4-star figure, and I'm slightly disappointed to give it that because I was really anticipating this release and I was really excited, and it felt like they got all the ingredients right, and I thought this is easily going to be a 5-star figure, but it just misses the mark slightly for me. And those issues are mostly, the most irritating thing here is the rubberized joints, for lack of a better description. They just don't feel very secure in the arms there, and I live in fear that they're just going to kind of tear off and pull away, which I'm really uncomfortable with, and I don't like that feeling. And he just feels much more limited in this area than he should be, really. He should have a lot more range of motion here, so that's really disappointing. But also, yeah, the lack of accessories as well is a shame, and the promise of him being able to stand freely on, say, 2 arms, I just haven't been able to replicate that. I've seen some really cool photos out there, so I guess it can be done, but it's not easy, that's for sure. On the other hand though, everything else about this figure is great. I love the new mold, I love the colours, I love the texture, I love these arms. I think they work really, really well. I love that we have that flexibility and we're able to create some really fun dynamic poses, and I think they've done a really nice job with the sculpting and, as I said, the colours. So all things being said, I think this is a really nice figure. It definitely warrants its 4 stars, and it does take the series a little bit further as well, and I hope it is a sign of things to come in the future. I hope we get to see some more figures like this that are really super specific to the animated series, because I love that series growing up, and it's always going to hold a soft warm place in my heart. And as you can see, I think these are starting to look really fun when we build out this world here. Having Doc Ock capture Aunt May is quite a fun image there. Having Spider-Man in the mix as well is really cool. And we're starting to get some really fun characters in this line now, so I hope they continue with this, and I'm eager to see what else is down the road. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe, as there'll be plenty more videos soon.